On the evening of Friday, 12th November 1976, as a bus driver made his way along the A9, the main arterial route from Inverness to Perth, he spotted a burning car in a lay-by. It was the beginning of an investigation that was to last 45 years. The burning vehicle was found on the southbound carriageway not far from a disused quarry at Dalmagary, around 14 miles south of Inverness. Fire crews soon arrived at the scene and put out the blaze. One of the first police officers on the scene was Constable Jimmy MacLean, and his concern was for the occupants of the car, but there was no one inside. Its registration, JAS 219P, was checked and was found to belong to Hugh MacRae and Company, a local building firm which had been set up in June 1965. Although it belonged to the company Gordon MacRae ran, it was his estranged 36-year-old wife, Christina Catherine MacRae, known as Renee, who drove it. Christina Catherine MacDonald was born at Raigmore Hospital in Inverness in February 1940. Her family lived in Beaulieu, some 10 miles from Inverness. She was described as fun-loving, was well-liked, and had a passion for Highland dancing. When she left school at 16, she got a job in Boots the Chemist in Inverness, and it was here she met her future husband. In 1963, she married 26-year-old Gordon Major Robson MacRae, a member of a local wealthy family. They initially lived in Beaulieu before moving to their home in Inverness. But it wasn't a happy marriage, and by 1974 they had gone their separate ways. They had 2 children, Gordon Jr., who was 9 in 1976, and 3-year-old Andrew, who Renee took with her that fateful night, telling her husband she was going to see her sister, Morag Govins, in Kilmarnock that weekend. She never arrived. By this time, Renee had a lover, and Gordon was seeing his secretary, who later became his wife, but he supported Renee and the 2 boys financially. One of Renee's best friends, Valerie Steventon, knew about Renee's affair. When she heard about the burnt-out BMW on the Saturday afternoon, she wasn't overly concerned about her friend. She then drove to the Longman Industrial Estate to see the badly damaged car, and was horrified. Thinking it was possibly joyriders, she put a note through Renee's door at 4 Cradlehall Park in Inverness, telling her what had happened to her car, then drove down the A9, hoping to see her friend on her return journey. On the Monday morning, Valerie rang Renee's house phone number, but there was no answer. She was now worried. As the day went on, she dialed Renee's lover's phone number, and to her surprise, he answered, but Valerie didn't speak and hung up. She knew then that Renee and Andrew had vanished, so she phoned Renee's sister Morag and told her she should report them missing. The following day, a search got underway. There was no way she would have left Gordon Jr. behind, and it was totally out of character, so the police tried to piece together her last movements. Detective Superintendent John Cameron led the initial stages of the inquiry. At that point, it wasn't labelled as a murder inquiry, but instead treated the disappearance as suspicious. Investigations got underway at the site where the burnt-out BMW had been found, and Renee's description was widely circulated. She'd been wearing a light-coloured sheepskin coat at the time of her disappearance, and her photograph was released to the press. The car was forensically examined by experts from Grampian Police. However, little was found due to the fire being extinguished by the fire service, which pretty much destroyed any evidence. Members of the Scottish Crime Squad were called in, and a sub-aqua team from Stirling were asked to search local reservoirs and lochs. At one stage, even a clairvoyant was called in. The day Renee vanished, her movements were retraced. She had visited MacRae and Company's main office in the late afternoon, and it transpired that the man she was having an affair with was 35-year-old William McDowell, known as Bill, the company secretary and accountant. Around a week after her disappearance, McDowell walked in to Inverness Police Headquarters. However, his wife turned up and dragged him away from the interview room, telling the police to leave him alone, even though he'd wanted to give a statement voluntarily. As the investigation continued, police released a photo fit of a man who'd been seen standing by a parked car just south of Dalmagarry and asked him to come forward with any information. Soldiers from the nearby Fort George Army Base helped in the search for Renee and Andrew, the police believing that she was probably dead. Members of the public also helped in the search, following an appeal by Donald Henderson, the chief constable. They were told that anything they found could be vital, no matter how big or how small. Gordon MacRae offered a reward of £1,000 for information on the whereabouts of his missing wife and son. This had been prompted by Inverness Provost Ian Fraser and was a substantial sum of money in the 1970s. MacRae claimed that although they were separated, they tried to reconcile during the 2 years previously, and he spoke of his concern for her and Andrew, stating publicly that he was sick with worry. It wasn't until McDowell was finally interviewed that police thought there was a chance Renee and her son were still alive. He told the police that he and Renee had planned a weekend away, but claimed that it hadn't come to fruition. He told them that they had a way of communicating using a certain number of rings on a phone, but that he'd not received the signal that the weekend was on. He also claimed he received 2 of these signals after the burnt-out BMW had been found. McDowell was questioned several times, but stuck to the same story and said he had no idea where Renee or Andrew were. Renee's house at Cradle Hall Park and the MacRae Company offices were all searched. In all, over 500 homes were searched, along with outhouses and sheds, and more than 200 statements taken, but it was all to no avail. Her cleaner, Margaret Ross, told police that she was very house-proud, was frugal with money, and that she didn't have a wide circle of friends, only a few close ones. She also said she was very proud of her car, cleaning it and hoovering it frequently. An RAF Command Canberra bomber was called in to scan a 15-mile stretch of the A9. Roads branching off the main road were checked, including tracks. Due to the conditions of the terrain, it would have been difficult to carry a body very far in that part of the Highlands, and to police it seemed highly unlikely that Renee and her son would be far from the road. One of the strange things about the case was that the blue pushchair that belonged to Andrew, which normally sat in the back of the car, wasn't found. 2 weeks to the day after Renee had set off for Kilmarnock, the police set up checkpoints and asked drivers if they'd seen anyone fitting the description of the missing pair. The last recorded sightings of them were by 2 witnesses shortly before 5 o'clock on the evening of the 12th of November. By the 24th of November, the case had been designated as a major crime inquiry, with Detective Inspector Donald MacArthur leading 10 detectives and 2 officers from the Scottish Crime Squad. The search continued. 2 men came forward, stating that on the night Renee's car was found, they'd been heading to a nearby pub and reported seeing a man dragging a heavy bundle towards Dalmagary Quarry, but they thought it was a dead sheep. Another couple came forward and reported that they'd been driving on the A9 and had seen a man walking along the road in the dark, pushing a pushchair. But the case went cold, as there was no trace of Renee or of Andrew, and no clues as to where they were or what had happened to them. In 2001, people living in Greystone in Angus thought that a man who'd lived with them for a time looked a bit like the one in the photo fit issued in 1976, stating he left the day the photo fit was released to the public. The house where he stayed, along with the garden, were thoroughly searched, but nothing was found. In 2004, retired Sergeant John Cathcart stated on the television programme Unsolved, Getting Away with Murder, that on the Tuesday, that was 4 days after the BMW had been found, he and 8 men searched Dalmagary Quarry, which was close to the lay-by where the car was found, but it was being infilled with waste from the roadworks on the A9. The next day, Cathcart and his squad were told to look elsewhere. 4 months later, he was back, and in April 1977, he noted the smell of something like a decomposing body. Hamish Borthwick, who was using a small track scraper-type vehicle, noticed it too, but again, there was nothing. Police were sure that Dalmagary held the key to the case, and the quarry has been searched on several occasions. In August 2004, 10 weeks of digging at the quarry began, costing £112,000. Cadaver dogs were used, and forensic anthropologist Professor Sue Black, then of the University of Dundee's Centre for Anatomy and Human Identification, was asked for her expertise. She knew the case well, having grown up in Inverness. Professor Black later stated that nothing had been found except a couple of packets of crisps and some rabbit bones. The crisps, however, did have a competition on them, and the closing date was in 1976. She also stated that where Cathcart had noticed the smell had also been dug, but nothing had been found. Although there was disappointment, Chief Constable Ian Latimer announced that some new information had come forward from a review of the inquiry in 2006. He also stated he believed that at some point the bodies of Renee and Andrew had indeed been buried in Dalmagary Quarry. In many cases like this, the most likely perpetrator is the husband or the lover. Valerie Steventon told police that Renee was happy with the arrangements from her estranged husband and hadn't been thinking about bringing divorce proceedings forward. MacRae himself said that he and his estranged wife were on good terms. But when he discovered who her lover was, could this have tipped him over the edge? Had she told him when she'd visited the offices that afternoon? But the police picked up on MacRae's shock when they told him what had happened. It was genuine, and he was discounted as a suspect. Attention turned to Bill McDowell. At the time, McDowell and his wife and family lived at Herdmuir House, Nairnside. He'd been in a relationship with Renee for around 4 years at the time of her disappearance. Renee told Valerie that McDowell was planning to leave his wife, Rosemary, and that they would begin a new life in Shetland. He told her he'd found a job there and a 4-bedroomed house where they could live, describing it in minute detail. When questioned about their disappearance, McDowell was very open about the affair and admitted that he was the father of Andrew. However, he denied any knowledge of the Shetland plans and claimed to have an alibi for the night the two went missing. Valerie remained adamant about her statement, but she did feel that McDowell wasn't completely committed to her friend. Renee had told her about the plans for the weekend of the 12th to 14th of November, that McDowell had arranged a trip to a hotel at Rannoch in Perthshire, which was supposed to be the start of him building a relationship with Andrew. Andrew was also beginning to call him Dada, and McDowell had been visiting the house at Cradlehall Park. In one of the rooms at Cradlehall Park, the police found boxes, which gives credence to validate Steventon's statement regarding Shetland. But why would McDowell kill his lover and son? In December 2006, the Crown Office said there wasn't enough evidence to bring a prosecution against anyone, and at that stage, no one had been arrested. In 1980, Gordon MacRae divorced his missing wife and married his secretary, known as Vivian Knox or Phillips, in 1981. McDowell later moved to London, having been fired from MacRae and Company, and after running a pub in Peebles called the Crook Inn. He began working as an accountant again, but was charged with alleged misappropriation of funds and forgery in 1990. Then there was a breakthrough in the case. Police Scotland's major investigations team had used modern forensic techniques, and blood had been discovered in the boot of the BMW. At Leonich near Culloden, a water-filled quarry was drained, and it was following this McDowell was arrested. Police raided his Penrith home in Cumbria and escorted him to Inverness Sheriff Court, where he appeared in private on 11 September 2019, charged with the disappearance and murder of Renee and Andrew. He made no plea and was committed for further examination. Sheriff Margaret Nielsen granted bail. On Monday, 7th June 2021, 79-year-old McDowell pleaded not guilty to the charges of killing the MacRaes at the High Court in Glasgow, but he didn't appear in person due to medical reasons. He was also charged with dumping their bodies and an additional charge of attempting to defeat the ends of justice by disposing of the bodies and effects by means unknown. He was also accused of torching the BMW, getting rid of a boot hatch from a Volvo car, and of dumping Andrew's pushchair. This was all done, the prosecution claimed, to cover up the murders and avoid arrest, leading to a prosecution that he wanted to avoid at all costs. He was also accused of showing malice and ill will towards Renee and Andrew. His solicitor, Murray McCara, then a Queen's Counsel, now a King's Counsel, lodged a special defence of alibi and incrimination. McDowell suffered from a series of health issues, which his solicitor said would make a trial difficult, and the case was postponed on several occasions. On Tuesday, 23rd November 2021, at the High Court in Livingston before Ian Armstrong, Lord Armstrong, a trial date was set. On Monday, 12th September 2022, at the High Court in Inverness, 80-year-old William McDowell stood in the dock. 17 days later, he was found guilty by majority by the jury of the murder of Renee and Andrew and of disposing of their bodies. Lord Armstrong sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum of 30 years. His lordship told him that the murders appeared to have been premeditated and planned in a most calculated way, and described the murders as executions. McDowell lodged an appeal, but this was dropped in December 2022. McDowell, who was serving his sentence at Glenacle Prison in Clackmannanshire, died at Forth Valley Royal Hospital in Larbert on 15 February 2023, less than 6 months into his sentence. He never revealed where the bodies of Renee and Andrew are. The search for them continues. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.